Welcome to the How of High Performance. And today I'm beyond thrilled to have James Williams, who is a high growth investor and formerly worked with Coca-Cola for over a decade on their flagship sponsorship event, the Olympic Games and the Paralympics. So welcome, James. Thank you for coming to talk about the How of High Performance.
Hi, Sally. Great to be here. Really looking forward to our chat about this.
So cracking on, can you just give people a quick overview of what I've just shared in terms of your career with Coca-Cola?
Sure. So I guess UK born and bred, started out in the marketing world of agencies, multi-category, until one of my ex-clients asked me to come and join them, which was Coca-Cola. Spent a number of years doing a lot of their innovative programs within the marketing team until moving on to the Olympic team for 2012. And that then took me 10 years across three different parts of the world. So I moved from London to Brazil and ended up in Tokyo, having more and more responsibility within the games until I actually had to lead the games in Tokyo during the pandemic. After that, I returned back to the UK and have taken on a different flow in life, which is about investing in high potential, high growth businesses, but also doing advisory, consulting, a lot of pro bono stuff in different places. So I have quite a diverse portfolio career at this point.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm keen to always start these conversations, James, by asking you, how do you define high stakes? And let me just position that before we go further, because for me, the how of high performance really comes to life and is tested when the stakes are high and it's not status quo. And that's what I'm really keen that these interviews uncover, is the high stakes moments behind high performance. So how do you define high stakes?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think we probably talked about this for many years, but for me, I think it's got more of an impact than your obvious standard high performance, which this is the knock-on impact that it has within both culture, in environments, in a business. So it's more than just about the business results. It's about the impact it has on people, it has on culture, on the business, in so much more of a wider context. And I guess that, for me, is where the stakes and the impact that this has on not just what you're working on, it's what the amount of ripples that it gives all the way out. And I think it's so difficult to get that right and to have positive ripples all the way down. And that's where you start talking about legacy. So for me, high stakes is where you're talking about long-term legacy impact.
Thank you. So what has been a key high stakes moment in your career specifically for your leadership, and how did you approach it?
I think I was fortunate enough to have a lot of those moments in my career, but I think the one that really does stand out would be Tokyo 2020 Olympics. And this was where you took a games, obviously all of my history of working on the games, but this was when I took over the leadership of the games at a very unique moment in time, essentially during the pandemic. We had gone from 4 years planning, getting ready, and in the year of execution, in fact, of the month of when the relay was supposed to start, the pandemic hit, there was postponement, and then my role in terms of my leadership, I had to rethink and rejig the whole games. So this was about understanding from the team point of view, a business point of view, surrounded in a culture that really didn't understand change. So within the Japanese culture, at a moment in time when the whole world didn't know what was happening next week, let alone in a year's time, and you're trying to organize an event that has so much more than just fizzy drinks about it. This was people's lives. The impact that you had in this, in a way, was just phenomenal. So it definitely, from my leadership point of view, it was transformational, I think, is what I would say.
I mean, I think it doesn't get much more high stakes, especially on a global stage. You know, you've got literally the world looking at you, and you're dealing with totally unprecedented constraints and changes. And the only thing you had was no certainty with the pressure of still putting on an event. So How did you approach that, James? How did you, through your leadership, when the stakes were high, work through it and get to a positive outcome?
I mean, I think for me, it was the vulnerability side of it. And I think when you're in these moments, yes, you have to show, clear leadership in terms of direction and things like that. But don't expect you have all the answers, because no one did. And I think anyone in that stage and I had a large team of people, and then various stakeholders outside of that, which was putting a lot of pressure on how we would operate, what we would do, how do you protect the team, should we be there, shouldn't we be there. We had more plans and contingency plans than I think. We definitely went past just the letters of the alphabet. We were on multiple letters. And I think at that point, it's about, you've got to demonstrate your vulnerability, your openness, your ability to listen and take on board what other people say, but being able to then make a decision based on that input. But then for me is saying why you might not or you will follow that path. So for me, it wasn't just about listening to people and getting people's points of view. It's about demonstrating that, okay, great, we're going to go in this direction, but explaining that and communicating that, taking people on board with you, taking you with people with along the way. And I never forget one of the poignant moments was that 11 days before the games, the new games, the postponed games, we were planning to have spectators. 11 days before, the organising committee said, no, we're not having spectators.
Wow.
And that was a real shock. And I never forget, immediately we found out that night before, I called a meeting the next day and I put up a photo. And it was a small child in a corner of a dark black and white photo in a little ball like this. And that was my opening slide to my team. And I said to them, you know what? This is kind of how I felt last night.
Oh.
And I think what that demonstrated was everything like, this isn't like we're just going to gung-ho, carry on, get on with it. Like, you know what? I had a moment where it was like, we've got to replan. Now it's just 11 days to work out what we're shutting down, what we're stopping, how we're changing. Now, it didn't mean that we didn't then step that. The next slide was, here's how we're going to approach it. Mm-hmm. This is what we're going to do. Take some time for you guys. Take some time out.
Nice.
Prepare yourselves. So I think there was a lot more of that emotional side to it. I think I was a lot more open to that and supporting, because this was tough. If it was tough for me, it was tough for everyone else. Taking the time to speak to your team, to check in on them, to see how they were, was the most important thing I did, because that built trust. And trust was the foundation of why this became the most successful games for Coke. So I think that was probably, for me, if I look back, if I remember looking back how I did it, then yeah, that was it.
Remarkable. And what tenacity and stamina to deal with such constant change. I think high stakes also requires that stamina, doesn't it? Because they're normally not moments in time. They are extended experience. Well, they're both, aren't they? They're a moment in time on the backdrop of an extended experience. I think that's quite a nice tension point to explore around high stakes, because there's, like you just said, that one moment whilst you'd already been navigating for weeks and months, if not years as well.
And it's having those curveballs thrown at you, and it's that ability to be agile, to adjust, to see what's coming, but still having that grit and perseverance to carry on. Because there's a point where you just go, God, have I had enough of this? And knowing that you can't, because you have a responsibility to so many other people.
How did you find that positivity within you, James, when you very honestly shared that child and how you felt? How did you in yourself recalibrate, so when you came to the team you were that leader through high stakes?
Yeah, I think, well, the way that I did it is going, okay, well, look, to a point we had put in plans, and we'd thought about what might happen and wouldn't happen, and in the plan over the year before we'd always been thinking, is it, isn't it, isn't it, is it, whatever it is going to be. And that was a case of me going, look, we've got the right plans, we've got the right people in place, we've got the trust in the culture that we'd built. in the way that we were operating as a team. That was trust. And that's what I could say, you know what, the way I got past this was knowing that we have the best team. We have a high performing team that cares about what we do. We had our clear vision about how we operated together. What are our ways of working? What are the values that we believed in? And for me, we'd put that structure in place so that I knew we could crack on. And yeah, was there a moment of like, whew, but actually, you look at that, and that's where I think it's so important about foundational and structural elements in building teams and high performing teams. And
Love
by
it.
setting that up, knowing how you communicate, how you talk to each other, how you respect each other, if you don't have that, then you're destined to fail at those high stakes moments.
Yeah, because you've got to have the foundations to hold it all together.
Yeah.
So if we swap the lens a bit now and we look at your life, because high stakes just doesn't happen in the world of work. It happens in our lives constantly, I think, at different tipping points as we grow and things change. Are you happy to share a key high stakes moment in your life and kind of what made it high stakes and how you approached on the personal side?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one to find one that has that kind of similar moment. But I'm gonna guess talk openly about a current one,
Okay.
because I made a choice that I was going to leave Coca-Cola after being there for 16 years in what was a great, amazing business in a very comfortable world of what I had known. And I guess I took the decision, much to I think a lot of people's surprise, like, why didn't you just stay? You had different jobs to stay in at Coke. But I made a decision, but was based a little bit on personal stuff, and this was about coming back home. And at the
Mm.
time, my mum had dementia. She was a few years into it. My dad needed support. There wasn't enough support at home. And I felt that there was a window of time with her that I wouldn't have had I then taken the next job and gone
Mm.
somewhere else.
Mm.
So it was important to me to come home. And we couldn't work out a role that was going to fix and work that out. And I'm grateful for Coke for trying. But there came a point saying, no, you know what? I'm going to take this jump off, and who knows what's going to happen. And that then started me on a journey that I'm still on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 3 years into the journey. And that has meant a lot of learnings, a lot of mistakes, and a lot of failures. And I'm still working it out, but it was transforming, knowing that at the beginning I want to transform from this to something else. So did I want to move on from James, head of the Olympics at Coca-Cola, to actually James as a standalone person who does different things? And that's still working its way through. But I think my approach is I gave myself clear guardrails as to what I would do and what I wouldn't do.
Mm.
And those were my 4 Ps, which are now called my 4 Ps because I'm a marketeer, so it has to be or a number or an acronym, whatever it is. So it was all about purpose. It was all about people. It was all about performance, and it had to be about partnership. And that are the guiding principles for how I made decisions on what I worked on and what I didn't work on.
Nice.
And that has allowed me to grow a portfolio of businesses, of consultancy stuff, and a lot of pro bono stuff that really means stuff to me and gives me direction so that I could approach that in a way that goes, you know what, if I'd just taken any old job doing any old thing, which I could have done,
Mm.
that wouldn't have taken me to where I plan to get to.
So I'm hearing there that your high stakes moment was to leave security, leave the path well known, and embrace the unknown and trust in yourself and set some guidelines to go out and find what would work for you as James, not as a leader within a big organization.
Yeah,
Mm.
you had to stick it. It was jumping out on your comfort zone,
Yeah.
going that's literally stepping out of everything that you knew. And the older we get, the more that you're constrained, or you're taught to be a certain way. From 16 years working for a company to jumping out and doing something very different on your own and
Brave.
learning a lot. And I think it was out of the comfort zone. I think David Bowie, said it right, is that when you go outside into the water, you go just out far enough so your feet don't touch the ground, and that's when you're at your creative best.
I love that. So if we look at those really two very different but similar situations, professionally and personally, of leading Coca-Cola, Olympic, Paralympic, through a global pandemic, changing plans at the last minute, out of your control to do that, having to follow mandates, to then taking control of your destiny and letting go of a lot of security and status and things you'd worked really hard for. Combining those high stakes moments, what would you say are the lessons that have stayed with you, whether it's personal or professional, that help to navigate high stakes situations?
I think the lessons and the elements that I think I've tried to take away from these kind of moments is one is the first one, which is about really understanding yourself and your values base. There's always that thing when you're in a high stakes moment, you're going to be called in to make decisions that have significant impacts. And knowing what your values base is and being clear with that allows you to make those decisions. Because if you wake up in the morning, the only person you have to look in the front is in yourself in the mirror. And that needs to inform what the right decision is. So I think one of my learnings was always being clear about where that stuck with me. There's always that nervousness with when someone gives you the opportunity to step into these moments of high stakes and high stakes leaderships and high performance. If you want to stretch yourself, you've got to be in it. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how it's going to pan out, but you've got to be in it to find out, to test yourself and know how you're going to react. So if you don't want to play in these stakes, then that's fine. The answer is no when someone says, do you want this job?
Yeah.
And they asked me to say, would you lead the Olympics, lead Coke through the Olympics? I could have said no. I had no idea what was going to happen or where it was going to go, but you've got to test yourself and put yourself in those situations. And I think my third one's probably about being kind to yourself, because you can't be in these moments and be a good leader if you're not kind to yourself. I think if you don't understand those moments and you see that and you're like, actually, I need to protect me just as much as if you're in charge and you're leading people, your responsibility is to them.
Mm-hmm.
But that responsibility is you've got to be responsible for yourself, because if you're not around to look after them, then there's no one to look after them. So you've got to make sure that you give yourself those moments and be kind to yourself. And I've been always very self-critical. So trying to strive for those elements of being the best and being good at everything. But if you don't take the moments, you drive into burnout. You get to a point, if you're working 24/7, that if at a high stakes moment, if you don't take those moments and look after yourself and you're not kind to yourself, then you're making this harder for everyone else.
I couldn't agree with you more. But isn't it interesting that sounds incredibly logical, but when it comes to it, it can be the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
With the permission just to put yourself also front and forward to be looked after.
Yeah.
It's critical. Wow, brilliant. So if there's only one thing you could offer, just one nugget from your own life and leadership experience, that piece of advice to other fellow senior leaders or people equally aspiring to become that senior leader about leading in high stakes situations, what would that one nugget be?
I don't know if it's one, but it's for me, it's about self-awareness and about understanding the culture and the environment you're in. Because if you don't, you're very likely to get it wrong.
Yeah. And you've had such an international background that you've had that over and over again of having to learn very different cultures to lead in.
And operate within them. And I think that's where you've got to have the self-awareness to know where your strengths and weaknesses are, but then how that impacts a culture and an environment that you work within. And in theory, you create.
Amazing. James, you've given us such a lot in such an effective way. So I just want to thank you so much for taking part. I think people can learn greatly from that. And I wish you everything and every success for the future.
Thank you very much.